Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine Galloway, certified high performance coach with another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about elevate. In other words, resilient standards. We worked on identity last week. Now that you're solid in your resilient identity, now you get to create your resilient community and elevate your standards of yourself and your goals and the people who put you around you. And as a mom, this is so important because who we put around us doesn't just affect us, it also affects our kids. So we're going to discuss that today for you, tips and tricks, true stories, strategies that you can apply as a resilient mother to raise the next resilient generation. And my guest today, I have Jill Wright. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell us more about you.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun. I love talking about this subject. I can shout it from the rooftops all day long. This is what I do too. I am a podcast host and an author and a coach for moms. And my role in this business is really just to help moms rediscover who they are outside of the role of just mom, remember who they are as a person, and help them grow and really take control of their lives in a way that it looks like how they want it to look. And some of the tools that I use for that are centered around self-care and time management.
Yeah, those two are so key. I learned that as a single mom. Like before I kind of had it, I had that figured out. And then I was outnumbered and on my own. I'm like, oh, I got to get a handle on these things.
Yes, I've been there too. I totally feel that. And it's so doable once you have the support, but we're always missing that community. So I'm glad that we're talking about this today.
And I always have to ask, what does resilience mean to you? So let's start there and then we'll go into community.
That's a great one. I would say to me, resilience means being able to bounce back, because we always know that there is going to be hiccups and setbacks and challenges, especially when we have wee ones, because your day never goes as you think it's going to.
No.
And so just to be able to sort of like take that in stride, dust yourself off, give yourself a bit of grace, and show back up in the way that you want to show up. Like it's not about being perfect all the time. It's about dusting yourself off and coming back intentionally in the way that you want to show up.
I love that you just brought up intentional, because I think that's the key, whether that's with our schedule or our emotions or what we're going to say with our words. If we slow down enough to be intentional with them, more likely we're going to have a better outcome. I often think that fits with resilience as well, because the more resilient you become, the more intentional you become with your actions as you realize what you have control of and what you do not have control of.
Yes. Absolutely. And there's a lot we have control of, but it really does feel sometimes like our external circumstances can just take over, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think that's a choice too. We can allow ourselves to get overwhelmed. I think it's really easy as a mom. We have lots of demands on us. We have a lot of roles and different hats that we're supposed to wear. And if we get caught up in that, we can get lost in it. And so it's important to like compartmentalize and kind of divvy out, okay, what really fits and what doesn't. I really like the analogy of your core values or the things that are most important for you in your life going into a vase first. And then all the extras, all the wants, all the extra things are the sand that you put in afterward. But if you try to put the sand in first, and then you try to put the rocks in, the core things, you can't fit it all within that structure. And so that way we don't really have to feel limited. We just have to decide, what are the key priorities, core values of my day, of my life, of who I am? And then what are the extra things I'd like to fit in where I can?
I recently heard a great analogy that I've picked up, and it's having a have to list and a hope to list.
Yes.
Which I really liked. Like I always encourage my clients as we're doing weekly planning to choose only 3 things for the week that must get done. And that leaves you some flexibility and space, right? For when your week goes sideways, because we know it's going to. We're always going to get more than 3 things done, of course, but to focus on the top 3 really allows you to hone in on what's important to you that week. And it changes. Our values can, like, we have more than, 3 values or 3 priorities, but each day and each minute they can be changing. So just to really be aware of like, okay, where am I at now?
Yeah. And I think there's something magical about that number 3 for some reason, because I see that everywhere. And as a high performance coach, it's actually part of our high performance planners to have just 3 key things that you focus on each day. And what are the 3 keywords that are your goal for this year, or that you would identify yourself as? What are you stepping into? And so I think there's the power of being able to focus. And I think we're in a society where we get thrown a lot of ideas and a lot of options and life hacks and different things. And we see, oh, wow, look at what they're doing over there. No, look what they're doing over there. Okay, I need to be doing all, it can be so overwhelming. But really, most likely, those people have the 3 things they're focusing on. It's really the little everyday little things that you consistently show up and do that lead to those bigger things. That it's that dark work that nobody sees, but you know you're working on it. And not everything needs to be for show. I think we can get caught up in social media, like, wow, oh, look what they're doing. And I love we're stepping more into who's being authentic and real, and wanting people that show up to show us, we're human and we have flaws and it's not perfect all the time. And that's okay. That's how we learn to be resilient. That's how we learn to have courage. But it's also how we learn what those priorities are. Because how else are we going to know without the mistakes and the failures that we got to flip around, those challenges along the way? We wouldn't know otherwise. We have to gain that knowledge along the way. And so important that we do that for our kids. And as we talk about resilient standards here as elevating ourselves, I think it's, what is that standard? What does success mean to you? And what does success as a mother mean for you in your home, for your kids? What works for you? I think it's important not to put too high of a standard on our kids. They feel like they can't achieve it, but also they still do need to have standards. They still need to have some guideposts, and it's our job to give them those. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that this generation specifically struggles with that a lot, and having, um, they're not great with expectations. I'm noticing in the schools as I'm volunteering with my kids. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old, and I think that we've kind of done a disservice to our kids with not really giving them that accountability of having the standards, right? Because what happens then, if you don't have a goal to work towards or a framework within to operate, then you kind of you give up almost. Like, you don't work as hard, or if you do achieve something, it's not worth as much to you, right?
Yeah.
And I think being able to step away from our kids and let them learn and let them fail and let them try it and figure it out for themselves can be so valuable, because we're teaching them. And I just finished a talk a couple of days ago at a school board about this, actually, about building resiliency in our kids. So it's perfect timing, but just really recognizing that they need to be able to assess risk and fail on their own. And that's how they develop this muscle of really trusting themselves and trusting that they can do it. Right?
Yeah, that's what builds confidence. And we want our kids to be self-confident and have that identity of themselves, that they can do hard things and that they can find solutions. So there is this balance of giving them a structure, but also giving them that flexibility of solving problems for themselves. But I think a key point that kind of ties this all together is you have to have a way to measure it.
Yeah.
And our kids will measure a lot by what we say about them. And what are we saying about their standards and about their choices and about, what are they doing to elevate their life? We need to focus and really give positive feedback when we see them doing something that is elevating their life, when they are hitting those standards, because if we don't, they're going to identify with the other things that we say. So I know that I have to be very intentional with my words with my kids and realize, is this empowering? Is this building? Or is this going to create shame or guilt or a feeling, especially with the teen? I have to be very sensitive to that, of they're stepping into figuring this out for themselves. They get to decide what success is for them. So they get to decide how to measure it. And I can go, yes, I think that's a good idea. But ultimately, they have agency.
Right. That's a really hard transition to make. I've got a teen in the household as well, and 3 coming up behind fast and furious. And it's like, the way that we speak to the kids is so different based on the age and their amount of agency, right? And I think that it's something that I'm trying to be really intentional about too, is not like using specific language about what was good or what could use work, right? In whatever their decision was or whatever their attempt or approach was, because they're not always going to get it right. They're going to suck at things. They're going to make mistakes and fumble, just like we do as their parents.
Yeah.
But not attaching a bad behavior or a bad choice to the person, right? And being really specific too with these kids about what specifically we're praising, not just a great job. A blanket statement doesn't help anybody's confidence, doesn't build anything. No. Hey, I really love the way you solved that problem by using your whatever XYZ, or that, I love how you did the shading in this particular color for my 4-year-old. Like, I love the colors you chose together, rather than just like, oh, that's a great picture. Good job.
Yeah.
It's a big
More
difference.
details. Yeah. Which means you got to be more intentional, which takes a minute. Because
Yeah, it
if
does.
another thing that I've talked about on another episode was like, if I'm just throwing that out there from like across the house or the kitchen or like in another room and I'm not watching the reaction, if I'm not making eye contact, am I really communicating? Am I really getting the message across? So a new standard I'm holding for myself is really, am I in the room that I'm saying this at? And are we making eye contact somewhere in the conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can be in the room physically, but you could be mentally checked out and thinking about the podcast or work or the laundry or what's for dinner. Sometimes, even though we're there, we do need to realize, like, oh, is our energy here in this conversation right now? Is our energy
Yes.
with our kid? Is there a connection that we can both feel? Because if there's not, you're not there, really.
Well, and it's so easy to fall into just like the easy, oh, I love you, honey.
Yeah.
Or like, remember who you are. Or the little sayings that do need to happen every day.
Right.
But if they become too repetitive, they almost lose their essence and meaning. They have to have our energy behind them and our presence behind them for them to really land with our kids. And so presence is really, I think, a key part of that, which we'll talk about in another month. But it's that standard you hold yourself to. I think it's hard for kids too, because what they see out in the world today is a lot of possibility. And it can be overwhelming for them and shut them down. Because if they think they have to be like this podcaster or this YouTube influencer or somebody doing that, or they have to have this kind of body or this kind of level of talent, they don't even work towards it. But they don't know it wasn't just magic that that person had that talent, or it wasn't just magic that they developed that skill set. It took failing at first. It took being resilient through really wanting that to be their dream and doing the work behind it. And we don't get to see the dark work that those people did. So I think it's really important as they set a standard for themselves, or they choose who their icon or their hero is going to be, to really point out who that person is and what work that they did, but also realize you're unique. There's no one else in the world like you, and you get to decide what your truth is. So your path isn't going to be exactly like someone that you admire. And I think that's great that you admire that person and you want some of those qualities, but understand you can do all the work, but your life is, and God may lead you somewhere else, but it's yours and you get to own it.
Really love those graphs. They pop up on my Instagram all the time. I don't know if you get them, but they're little memes like, progress doesn't look like this, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like do, 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 do. And you're still making progress even though you have setbacks. That's normal. I think normalizing what it actually looks like, that achieving anything that you're going for is actually going to be hard, or else everyone would have the thing.
Yeah, everyone would do it. Yeah.
Right? So I think starting that idea really young can be super helpful in building this idea for our kids, because, like, for instance, my 14-year-old wants to be a YouTube star. I'm like, okay, are you going to start like a YouTube channel? And he's like, oh, maybe. It's like, well, no. There are steps you need to take to be able to achieve this thing that you say you want. And so also encouraging our kids with finding something that does fill them with passion or excitement. It doesn't have to be career related, right? It doesn't have to be academic. It doesn't have to be sports related. It could be creative, like whatever your particular kid, and each kid's going to have different interests and avenues where they're naturally drawn, but leaning into that and encouraging them to lean in to their own thing. Because like you said, it's so easy to see all of the options in their worlds with all of the influencers, all of the adults that they come into contact with, all of the videos that they're consuming. It can be hard to distill what they actually like.
Yeah. And it's okay. We got to give them the room to figure that out. I would rather let my kids figure that out at home than send them out in the world not knowing who they are and then trying to figure it out with much bigger consequences. And so I think it's really important to let them explore. And another thing I wish so much I had understood, and I really understand this as a single parent and just a parent in general, I've accepted that I'm not the only one that influences my kids.
Yeah.
And I may not be the one that gets them where they want to go. In other words, like I may not have the skill set for my daughter who's really good at math to get her into a field of engineering or something. Just not my forte, not my thing. I'm very artsy fartsy creative that way. So that skill set, she's going to probably need a teacher. She's going to need a professor or somebody in her circle to get her there. And I also, as a teen, they pull away. It's just part of the process. And so I need to know that there are other people elevating my children in the right direction, and accept that my influence starts to change and dissipate just a little bit. It's still there. I'm always going to be mom, but there's this time where they're going to pull away and then come back. And I just need to allow that space and honor that, but also elevate them in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so beautifully said. And we start to notice this really young when our kids go off to school or daycare, preschool, nursery, like any of these things that, I mean, for sure, when school starts, there are other kids around and their parents influence their attitudes, right? So the kids come home and they're learning behaviors, age appropriate behaviors from their peers, and they're being shaped, molded, disciplined, rewarded by the teaching staff, right?
Mhm.
As well. And then maybe after school care. And then you've got the grandparents who, however well meaning, are never going to parent the way you parent, right?
Nope.
And then, like in the instance, I have a son who's got special needs and he's in therapies all the time. And I'm not in those sessions with him, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be super, you can't always choose. But what you can do is you can help your children be able to discern for them what is valuable, what they feel good with, what feels icky. Let them know that they can sort of like leave some advice on the table if it doesn't feel right for them, and give them that autonomy to discern for themselves, even from a young age, just by asking
Yes.
questions and talking about it.
And I have one advantage there, being homeschooled, private schooled, and public schooled. It taught me, the teacher was taught by somebody else.
Yeah.
So if I am learning something, where did they learn it from? And then do I go investigate? Is that true? Is that, do I believe that really at some point? I was really kind of disappointed when I became a dental assistant, because I thought I am going to learn about the teeth. I'm going to, I hadn't really done anything like super scientific before. And so I just thought it was really black and white and fact, really. And that was really interesting to kind of learn, no, we experimented and did this, and this is the result we got. And we experimented and we did this, and this is the result we got. And we go off of, the most positive results that we have. And for some reason that blew my mind of, we all don't really know what we're doing, do we? we don't really know. We're all still figuring it out. And that's important to realize. And so since we're all still figuring it out, you need to be curious. You need to be inquisitive. You can question respectfully and do your own research. And you might find a new truth or discovery or the next step, because you're willing to question and you're willing to be inquisitive and realize, I get to teach myself. Do I have to have a teacher? I mean, so many people are teaching themselves on YouTube now. They're just like going and finding the information and teaching themselves. My daughter's taught herself how to play the piano. Like, it's possible. And I think it's so important this generation gets to take advantage of that. I mean, that's their kind of cool new advantage that we didn't have. I didn't even have computers in elementary school. I think maybe 5th grade, I finally got a computer. Pioneer Crossing, anyone? Okay, yeah, now I'm showing my age. But
well, no, it's so right. Like, here's your permission slip to go and see what works for you, and understand that you can kind of blaze your own trail in a lot of ways and take control of your life and the things that you're learning in it.
And with that, who's in your circle? You get to decide who are those people that are absolutely the ones that you count on, are the ones you want to be in your circle. How have you done that as a mom to like elevate yourself and create that community, and therefore have that ripple effect or that little trickle into your kids' lives by having them see you create the right community for yourself?
As a friend and a social person, I have been really good at keeping relationships going that really fill me up. And so my kids are familiar with seeing mom go out with her friends. My friends are coming over. We're going to their houses. So they see me having relationships where there's trust and honesty and openness. And like, I think one of the nicest things is that we're not cleaning up the house before all the friends come over. It's okay for them to see the dust and the dirt. Like, this is the friendship is the thing, right? They're here for the friendship, not the house. And of course, in the beginning, my kids were friends with my friends' kids. And so I was able to sort of see like, okay, are these still the types of friends that my kids are going to get along with? Are they parenting, even though they're my friends, they might not be parenting the way that I would choose to have my kids exposed to. And then as they started making their own friends, I would like interview the parents, kind of like I would set up play dates with the parents, make sure that I understood who their kids were, how their kids interact with mine, how the parents interact with the kids, and just sort of look bird's eye view. Like, is this a situation that I want to bring in? Right.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just a lot of being intentional and present. Those words again come up for me because I put a concerted effort into building the community around me. And I think my kids are really able to see that, even though they're small, and I see them building their communities intentionally as well. You know, I have a daughter who is 4 turning 5, and she'll come home and she'll say like, oh, you know, that so and so is in my class, but I don't like how they treat this other person. And so we don't really play together that often. And I'm like, oh, it's really interesting how you can make those decisions based on the behaviors you're seeing your peers display in kindergarten.
Yeah, and it's good to notice those things. Yeah. My kids are interesting, and I think we're just very open-hearted, kind people. We attract all sorts of people, and sometimes that has been a problem.
Right.
And so it's been interesting watching my children navigate as they want to be inclusive with everyone, still learn to put boundaries around it. My teen especially had to learn that this year with some friends asking a little bit too much of her. And I didn't know what was going on until we had a really good discussion on it. And it took a while to get there to be comfortable about it. And once we did, it just changed so much for her because she realized, oh, I can still be friends and put this boundary here. And it's still good. It's still okay. I didn't have to give too much. Like I could give what was comfortable, but it was kind of a new concept to her because she just wanted to let everyone feel loved and everyone to feel important and was giving a lot and learned maybe it was too much. And so I'm glad she learned that lesson now.
Yeah. And I
So,
mean, what a beautiful heart and sentiment for her to want to make everyone feel comfortable and create this loving, caring space around her. But I think in that also the boundary pieces, it comes hand in hand. It's so important to have both because you can get, as she found out, pretty derailed if you're just giving everything away that you've got. There's nothing left for you at the end of the day.
and then another daughter, her struggle with relationships and figuring out who's a part of that community or not was letting me know when somebody was like going too far with her. She's the kind that like if somebody hurt her, like some instances were like spitting in her hair, pulling her hair, or like some other things, or bullying her. She wouldn't let anyone know until it got to the point that like it was almost it had gone too far. And really so for her it was speaking up about things and realizing that you need to share a little sooner what's going on so somebody can intervene and that somebody else can and come be a part of it. If you can't solve it on your own, you do need to get other people involved. And it's okay to it's not selfish. It's okay to defend yourself. It's okay to it's not unkind to go, hey, enough. And
Right.
so it's interesting because every kid's completely different when it comes to this. And some of it's their personality and some of it's who they just naturally attract with their energy. And then it's that level of your relationship with them of how much they tell you what's going on or how much they feel comfortable trusting other adults to be the ones to intervene and the ones to keep confidence in some of those things as well.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I'm just thinking back now to some instances where my kids have had trouble with their peers and they're feeling left out or bullied or something like that. And in some circumstances, the teachers were very supportive, and in others they weren't. And I've noticed that after an episode where the teacher's not as supportive or doesn't give the kid who's coming to them with this problem the solution they're looking for, the support that they feel like they need, then they're less likely to go next time, of course,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
out of our control, as we talked about other people influencing our kids, but certainly good thing to look out for within your kids and have that. That's why it's so important to have that strong base of trust with each child that you have in your own home that you have influence over, because you're the steady pillar and that's all you can control. Yeah.
And that is the one thing that'll never change, no matter who's in the community in our children's life, is we're mom. And that's what we get to be. We get to be that constant pillar of love and that source of consistently being there for them. And that'll have strings that get further and closer depending on their choice. But if we always show up, then they know they can count on us. And that's where it's so important in our role. And also, I think the comfort of knowing, though they may be far away, though they may be making different choices for a time, they will usually always come back home to center because they know that you're there and that you're available. And I think people who don't have that core, don't have that center, really struggle. It's really something that's meant to be a part of our family unit, is to have that mother figure, that person that we can really go to and do the relationship building, to learn from, to get the guide, because we know that they have the best intentions for us, that they have nothing but love for us and want us to thrive and want us to become the best that we can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And creating like a safe space for someone to be themselves is the best gift, right?
Absolutely.
That's so nice.
So do you ever put yourself in situations where you're like not the smartest person in the room so that you can elevate yourself and that you can learn? And do you ever do that for your kids as well? Put them in a situation where you're hoping that others will influence them at a higher level?
For myself, yes. In business, all the time. I'm in all kinds of groups, communities, workshops where I am learning. I am very green compared to a lot of the people in my circles, and that's intentional because I outgrow people, and that's that. I think that's sort of my MO for operating in business and in the world, is that I show up and I get as much as I can and I up level myself until I feel like, oh, I need some more. And then I go find the next resource. And having a connection with someone in community is a really powerful way for me to do that. Sometimes it's books and podcasts. Sometimes it's face-to-face. Sometimes it's like a virtual networking event or something like that we do. And so that's constant for me. And I find that served me very well in accelerating growth at my pace and in the direction I want to go. I can't think of examples for my kids though, but I suspect that because I operate that way, that I parent that way too. But there's nothing that comes to mind in terms of giving you a solid example about that for the kids.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see because they do watch. I think they don't, and I'll notice something and I'll be like, oh, they were paying attention after all.
Right.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
so I think remembering that the standards that we hold do elevate them. And to have a consistent standard in the world today that changes its mind on things quite frequently, what's trending at the time, it's important to have that consistency and to have that person that they can go to. And that gets to be mom. And being a resilient mom helps them to resiliently navigate all the pros and cons of what they get to choose and face in the world today and how they get to elevate themselves. So any last thoughts as we wrap up here?
Just to trust your instincts as you go through this. You are doing a good job. You are creating resilient kids. You are stepping into the role as best you can in any given moment. And that is enough. So trust what you're doing and keep on showing up.
Yes, well said. Well, thank you everyone that's listening. We're so happy to have you here. Please stay tuned as we continue more guests on this subject this month. I believe in you, believe in yourself, God bless, and we'll see you next time on the Resilient Mother Podcast.